Macbeth, Act 3, Scene 4. Really is one of those, isn't it? One of those key scenes if you've read the play already. Now again, I'm hoping that maybe these videos are helping you as you read the play. Maybe you're watching them before you read the play in school so that you're getting a good handle on the story and the action, the characters and the main plot points. But this is a really important scene. It's the scene where the role of the supernatural in the play again gets is heightened. So we know the witches, like the supernatural is a part of the narrative of this play from the very beginning, because we meet the witches at the start and they can fly and they can predict the future and we know that they're not human. And this is the scene in which the secondary, and obviously God is always present in the play, so that's part of supernatural. So when Duncan is killed, we hear about the storm which blew the chimneys down where Lennox and Macduff were staying, and we hear later on from Ross that the king's horses were eating themselves, so they were turned cannibalistic and turned wild in nature. So we know that. So God is there. But here we have, this is a very famous scene where Macbeth is haunted by Banquo's ghost. And Banquo's ghost, to anybody who's into Shakespeare, is really fascinating. I love that image. I found that image in it's a still image from a production of Shakespeare's play Macbeth. And for me, who is that in that scene? Well, it's meant to be Banquo. For me, that's Macbeth. Just that breakdown. You can see, if you look there, right, in the top line, you can see humanity in those eyes, right? You see it there? And then in the second part, the eyes that lie underneath here, just look at that there. Look at that there. See the hate, see the monster that lies within. And for me, I think that's what this scene is all about. Macbeth is haunted by Banquo's ghost. And look, we have to accept that in the world of the play, Banquo's ghost is real because... Because Shakespeare has a stage instruction which says, enter the ghost of Banquo. So clearly the idea, because of Shakespeare's audience would have absolutely believed in the existence of ghosts and the supernatural. This was not theoretical. It was part of their, what they understood to be true and real in life. But but the ghost for me is more interesting as a study of Macbeth's psychology. There was a question, I think it was 2017. It was one of the best questions that was ever asked in the Leaving Cert. And it was that Shakespeare's Macbeth is a compelling psychological thriller. And that idea of psychology, of Shakespeare being somebody who was a student of human psychology 200 years before the word was even invented. And he was. So when we see Macbeth being haunted by Banquo's ghost in this play, and then we see his response to that haunting in this scene, we see Shakespeare getting down into the granular detail of what Macbeth is. We see his conscience eating away at him, and then we see how he breaks and how he decides to eschew, to reject conscience, and that it changes him fundamentally, this haunting by Banquo's ghost. So whether or not there's a real ghost, and we have to say there is, it's the symbolism of the haunting of the ghost that really matters. So at the start of the scene, he's informed of Banquo's death, and his reaction is significant. He's delighted to see his, sorry about the noise, the murderer covered in his friend's blood, because that means his friend is dead. So that is indicative of the change in his character. He's not a hero, he's repugnant, appalling, cold-blooded, all those things. But then when he hears of Fleance's escape, he kind of despairs, because for him it's ruined his buzz, and again that is indicative of how corrupt he is, that he was celebrating the fact his friend was murdered, but then the sense of celebration is taken away, mitigated, reduced, whatever word you want to use, by the fact that a child survived the assassination attempt. At that point, Lady Macbeth appears and she says, look, all the lords of Scotland have assembled for this feast that they're having in their castle. So again, put on the happy face, that appearance of contentment, when the reality is despair and torture. And when he arrives in to sit down, all the lords stand up and he says, sit down. And they say, my lord, sit down. And he says, well, there's no spare seat. And of course there is a spare seat, but Macbeth looks at the seat and he sees that it's occupied by the ghost of Banquo, sitting there covered in blood, covered in wounds. Now, you see productions of the play where the actor who played Banquo is there, covered in blood, sitting in the seat. But you also see productions of the play where the seat is empty. And of course, it's empty because A, if the ghost is real, the ghost only appears to the person who it wants to haunt. So nobody else can see it. And that's what happens in the play. Lady Macbeth can't see it. The other lords can't see it. They all think Macbeth has gone mad. But of course, if you leave the chair empty, then that leaves room for the idea that maybe the ghost is not real and it's just a manifestation of Macbeth's guilty conscience. And of course, there's no right answer to that. Your teacher can have their opinion and you can have your opinion. But what you have to know is that the haunting of the ghost is Macbeth's haunting by the ghost is incredibly dramatic and also leads to this moment where he makes this declaration at the end of the play, which triggers what happens next. So, as I said, that's all laid out in that section there. I'm not going to read all of that, okay? About the ghost being manifestation of his guilt. So you can read that yourself. Let's get to the key quotes. So many good ones here. Start learning them, get that work done, have a look at the knowledge checks when you've watched the video. So when Macbeth says, better thee without than he within, he's talking to the murderer. The murderer is covered in Banquo's blood. He says, I am delighted to see Banquo's blood spattering your clothes, because it means it's not in his veins keeping him alive. Now, Jesus. That's a pretty sick thing to say. That's indicative of Macbeth's corruption. That's indicative of the transformation in his character from hero to, from someone we admire to someone that appalls us. Then one of the great lines in the play, I love it. Thou art the best of, so you hear best of, and we think this is going to be something good. And then that's juxtaposed with cutthroats. So that juxtaposition of something which we think of as being good, best. Sorry, no. I don't know why it's doing that now continually. I'll talk to the tech team. The juxtaposition of best and then cutthroat. And you realise, Jesus Christ, look how corrupt he is now. Like, he celebrates things that he's supposed to be appalled by. A cutthroat is an assassin, a murderer, a sneaky person who slices open the throats of other people. It's a horrific sobriquet. It's a horrific nickname. But Macbeth celebrates people like that. But then the ghost appears. And the ghost never speaks. And this is again lends credence to the idea that the ghost is his imagination, the manifestation of his guilty conscience. And he says to the ghost, never shake thy gory locks at me. And there, if the ghost is on stage, we can see it, but if it's not on stage, it's the imagery, the blood imagery. We'll get into all this when we get into later on in the year, the video content. The blood imagery is so important in this play. Like, the ghost appears covered in brains and bone, and he's sliced open, Banquo, because he's been brutally killed. And the ghost is just shaking his head at him, locks at your hair. So the ghost just sitting there in the chair, he's just doing that. And what's he saying? Look what you've done, Macbeth. Look what you've done. You killed your own king. You killed your own friend. You know where you're going. So when Macbeth is haunted by the ghost, it's a reminder of what's inevitably going to happen to him. Of course, if the ghost is real, then the afterlife is real. And if the afterlife is real, then him going to hell is not theoretical. It's actual. He's going to be damned. This is proof of it. So, following the appearance of the ghost, we have this conversation with Lady Macbeth. And Macbeth's descent into tyranny, the fact that he is going to be a tyrant as a king, becomes clear. Because don't forget, he can't rule the way a king should rule, with the love and the cooperation of his people. That can't happen, because he is a usurper, because he stole the crown. So he can only rule through fear and terror. So he tells Lady Macbeth, there's not a one of them, but in his house I keep a servant feed. He's already using the tactics of, look behind me. Books about Stalin, about totalitarian states in the 20th century. We know what that goes on in our world today. Big Brother is watching you. Macbeth is watching. He's using the tactics of the despot to spy on the Lord so that he can eliminate anybody who might criticize him. And then he says this, and in a play that's just awash with brilliant moments, Shakespeare for me is all about the language. It's just magnificent. In a play that features the tomorrow and tomorrow soliloquy, which a lot of people would argue at times, including me, is the best thing that he ever wrote. It's very hard for me to pick. This line here, this 3-line sequence, piece of dialogue here, is in the top 5 quotes in the play. learn it and understand it. He tells his wife, I am in blood, stepped in so far, that should I wade no more, returning were as tedious as go o'er. It's a brilliant example of figurative language. And it sets up what's coming in the rest of the play. Violence, blood, murder, chaos, mayhem. This is what happens to a country when the rightful king is killed. That's the message that Shakespeare is sending in this play. Think about that theme of kingship. What does the quote mean? Just try and get the image. There's a river, but it's a river of blood. Macbeth has already stepped into that river. He's halfway across. So he's soaked in blood. So he says, it's going to make no difference if I stop now and go back to that bank or continue all the way across. And what does that mean? It means I'm already going to hell. I killed my king. I killed my best friend. So what am I going to do now? Stop killing and let my enemies send me to hell? No. I'm going to keep killing. I'm going to do as much killing as I can to stay king for as long as I can, to escape my inevitable doom for as long as I can. And he doesn't give a damn about all that blood that's going to be shed and all those innocents who will suffer as a result of this policy. So he is exactly the opposite type of person that should have royal authority. And of course, the message again is clear. God didn't pick him for a reason. He should have known his place. He's a warrior. He's a killer. He should have stayed where he was in the hierarchy of the kingdom. But because he took that crown, because of his driving ambition, he is now in a place where he is going to cause misery and suffering to the entire nation of Scotland. Fantastic. I love you, Shakespeare. You rock.